What's up, team? We are here with the talented, very successful Mr. Lars.
Good looking.
Yeah, oh, that's true. Yeah. Good looking.
Humble.
Yeah, humble at the same time. Head and Borg. You know, it's not a regular occurrence that I sit down with someone that like actually punched me in the stomach. You didn't physically punch me in the stomach, but you did it with a question, or really a statement. On a coaching call, you wanted me to bring you a personal win and professional win. And I had a very hard time bringing you personal wins. Professional wins were fine. And I shared with you a professional win that I'd gone to my son's soccer game, and I shared with you that he was surprised, like, and you were like, that's terrible. In all seriousness. And it really knocked the wind out of me and caused me to really stop and pause and think, you know, what I was doing and how I was spending my time. I also know that you can't give somebody something that you don't already possess. And I know part of your story is having gone down a similar track, and whether it was someone like you who said that to you, or you kind of noticed yourself, that caused you to start to make some changes. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was probably more or less just not having, you know, the comfort of a family sort of environment as a kid, and just knowing that I didn't want that for my family. And then you get into real estate, you're like, oh shit! It's like instantly it blows up in every part of your life. Yeah,
and when you were at the gala and you gave the talk, you showed pictures of you with like I think it was your son, and there's like in your as you're like on a laptop, like writing a deal.
I'm on my BlackBerry.
Yeah. So you did that, and you notice kind of, because I'm aware, like, you know, in our families, like, we're like, you know, we're leaders, right? And I think people are more influential than they realize. And we were talking last night about this kind of mental map of different levels of leadership, which really coincide with different levels of consciousness. So you had this awareness, like, hey, I want to have this like tight family unit. It's really important to me. At the same time, the world and real estate as a business was pulling you down this path of working 60, 70 hours a week, because that's what traditional success is. And, you know, that first level is like, of consciousness is to me. So was there a time where in your business you were thinking that way, like, oh man, all of this stuff is happening to me?
No, I think you and I are similar. I think we skipped the to me stage.
Okay.
To a certain extent. I mean, we were talking, you know, we do have the ability, for whatever reason, we're like massively driven, you know. So I got out of corporate America and got into, you know, this industry, and, you know, instantly found the traditional success. And that just leaves you with not a lot of bandwidth, not a lot of sort of margin in your life to show up as the dad or the husband that you really want to show up as.
Got it. So,
you know, so we were able to, and we're both like this, we're able to, you know, we have enough sort of personal accountability, and just driven, and, you know, we can hardly help ourselves to a certain extent. You know, the homes are there just to, those commission checks are ours to take.
Just to get,
And you know, the industry's jacked up in a lot of ways, because most agents are, you know, they're just victims, you know, and the interest rates and the market and low inventory. You know, and that's just not, it doesn't have to be the story.
Yeah, and we both coach agents and have had coaching companies for like a decade, and that is something that I see is very, very prevalent, which is that particular level of leadership or consciousness, which is to me. So this is happening to me, you know, my sellers need to be nicer so I can enjoy myself more, or enjoy the business more, or the market needs to get better, or interest rates need to come down. And that level is where my success or failure or my personal happiness is dependent on external situations, props and players. And you were referring to the by me, which is where it's like, well, if it's to be, it's up to me. And you even said that word, which is responsibility, right? Where it's like, all right, what skills do I need to learn? There's always an opportunity in the marketplace. I just need to go and find it. I'm one relationship away from changing my family tree for the rest of our life. Now, did you always have that? Like that by me? Or was there like moment?
The dynamic in my family was, for a lot of different reasons. There was a lot of chaos, and I didn't want to bring that chaos. Divorce, alcoholism, and just a bunch of stuff. And I think I just took the role of just doing the right thing in my family. So I studied real hard, and you know, my outlet to all of that was the path of achievement.
Got it.
You know, and just working hard, and almost like you can't control it. You know, it's just like, I'm gonna study for this test until I know I'm gonna get an A. I'm gonna, you know, work hard, where I sold 44 homes in my first full year in real estate.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when you say that, I know what you mean. I think my wife, who's in the room, she would agree with you. She's like, can't even help himself. Like, it's like
she's nodding.
Yeah. Well, and I told her one time, I'm like, hey, if something was to happen to me, would you marry somebody that like was like totally not ambitious at all? Like, are you like, I don't know, somebody, you know? And so, but I know underneath it, at least for me anyway, I'm curious for you, what I've come to like be aware of is that achievement thing is more like, well, if I achieve more, then I'll be loved. Or if I achieve more, and it's a fear that if I don't, and if I'm not like a rock star at everything, then people won't love me, is really what that is. Yeah,
I mean, probably don't have enough time to unpack all of our baggage on this episode, but I feel blessed, I mean, in that way to have, at least that was my addiction, you know, so to speak, versus like, you know, doing way more sort of harmful things or things that are not like socially acceptable.
Yeah, it's a healthy addiction.
Achieving and making lots of money is like, it's acceptable.
Yeah, it's like, good job.
Right. But it has this massive like collateral damage that I just wasn't willing to accept, you know, all of that.
And being that you weren't willing to accept it, I know the suffix "-ide", right? What it means is to kill. Homicide, suicide, pesticide, genocide. So you made a decision, this is not acceptable to me. Now, at that time though, was there anyone that you could turn to that could be like, hey, this is how you like build out, this is how you create margin in your life in the real estate business? Was there anybody that you could learn from, or was it more like you pulling from corporate America and having that background and like an MBA where you're like, oh, this is how business is like supposed to run?
I mean, honestly, I think it was my first coach. You know, I went to a conference like my second month in real estate, and the first book that coach had me read was E-Myth.
Okay.
Revisited.
Yeah.
So I think that set this trajectory that, you know, I was going to build a business, a real business that gave me freedom. Even though they're really, I mean, even at the time, teams and that whole sort of leverage model, the team leaders had no freedom whatsoever. They were still selling like, there are still teams that are doing like 1,200 transactions with a team leader selling 200 homes.
There's still agents doing that now.
Yeah, and they're marginally profitable at that.
Yeah, marginally.
You know, so I was going to figure out a way to do it as a business where I didn't have to show up every day and just deal with the nonsense of all the drama from all of the clients all the time. It was just too much.
Yeah, and so for those who are listening, check out the E-Myth. It's an awesome book. We can drop it in the show notes here. And so that gave you kind of the mental map, like the framework of, hey, like I need somebody to make the pies, and somebody to you know, sweep up at the end of the night, and somebody to, you know, be at the register. And then you started to systematically, because you were very systems oriented. He is the Excel master of the universe. And you started to systematically build out SOPs for each part of the business. Is that right?
Yeah, and it's like, if you've seen the movie The Founder with Michael Keaton, the scene where I think it's on a tennis court, and and he's on a ladder, and he's like, you know, wiping out the chalk lines. And I mean, granted, that's, you know, they called it the speedy system. But their vision was to just optimize that one thing so they can, you know, roll it out into 40,000 locations or whatever. And I kind of viewed the real estate business like that. There's so much nonsense that an agent does on a regular basis that does not make them any money. And they think it does. And the traditional model will have you think that you need to do all the 12 jobs that a real estate agent's required to do. And 10 of the 12 jobs you can hire people to do for way less than $50 an hour.
Yeah, and as you were doing this, I think you started to get, like, obviously it worked smashingly successful for you. What were you doing at that time, like 400 units or something like that? Yeah,
I mean, not every year did we do. 5 years after my first, I did 44 my first full year, and then we did over 10 times the production with 10 agents, and I was out of production.
And you were completely out. And it was totally profitable.
Out. And it was, I took home 1.2 million that year.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And there were some very kind of prominent voices in the real estate industry that were like, nah, you're full of shit, man. There's no way you could do that, right?
Yeah, the year before, I won't say his name, but he's been coaching for 40 years, and he's got a son that has a big coaching company too.
Yeah.
I sent out for a webinar. The title of the webinar was How I Sold 312 Homes Working 1 Day a Week.
Yeah.
And this guy, who's the OG of coaching, you can figure out who it is, sent that email, took a screenshot of that email and sent it out to his entire list. And so people were emailing me like, and he said, if you believe this, I have land to sell you, like swampland to sell you in Florida. Or something.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that is such a, it's like the, what's that analogy? They said it today in our event where, you have one crab in a bucket and the crab will get out.
Yeah.
And you have multiple crabs in the bucket, they're going to pull the crab down.
That's what that is.
That's exactly what that is.
Yeah. And I'm aware it's also a lack of open-mindedness. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I got an email like that sent out about me too. So we're in the same camp.
It's awesome. And I was talking to that guy's son, like face to face with his son. And he said he couldn't get his dad to go golfing with him that weekend because he had a hefty event he had to do.
Yeah.
It's crazy if you think about it.
I think you can only duplicate what you are.
Yeah.
Right. So, and it's interesting to know something's true. Kind of like we know, like EXP is like real. It's like a real thing. Rev share is a real thing. Equity is a real thing. Collaboration is a real thing. And for other people, it'll be like, nah, that's not real, right? So you're doing that, and then you figured like, okay, I can teach other people how to do this, right? Was that a natural thing? Was it a natural growth? Or did people start to reach out to you and they were like, hey.
No, you still give me shit today about like not being on social media. Like I'm super introverted. Like give me a spreadsheet over like anything. I was telling Carla, like I haven't been on Facebook in like, I don't know how long. And that's the only platform I'm even on, which is not like.
Which is funny to me because you said Facebook first. That's kind of funny to me.
Right.
And what I told you today,
I go on Instagram and I get a headache.
Yeah.
Like everyone's better looking than them. And their kids are better behaved and they're traveling all the time. It's like, what am I? I'm a loser over here.
Yeah.
So, but I forget your question.
But you still managed to like somehow build a coaching business.
Yeah. So I think it was exactly where we started the conversation, where there's a good book, I think it's called The Second Mountain, where it's like you kind of figure out your first mountain is all the homes you sell and the
grinding, the pushing,
and all of that, and then the second mountain is helping others to do it, so leading others and impact. And
did you really feel like a calling to do that, or was it more like? I
remember turning to Julie, my wife, and saying, "Do you think I can start a coaching company?" And she, when I first married her, I had this like super cozy, multiple six-figure corporate job, and then within, we weren't married yet. Yeah, like I got into real estate just after.
Start all over.
And I went from like multiple six figures, super cozy, to I think I netted $37,000 my first 10 months in real estate. I spent money on everything. I sold a bunch of homes, but I just wasted a bunch of money. And I was like, man, I've got to figure this thing out. So no, it wasn't really natural. I mean, I think there's just this higher calling where I saw a lot of, even the big players in the industry that just they didn't have a quality of life. They weren't, it wasn't balanced, and they didn't really figure out the system side, and they were still heavy in the business. And a lot of, I watched some of them, just have major challenges. And I think that was the inspiration. I was also saved in 2009, so I got into real estate in 2007. I was saved in 2009, and that just kind of got me on this journey of just more serving. And when I first started my team, it was very selfish.
Was it?
So selfish, like not as harsh as I'm going to make this sound, but they were there to serve me.
Yeah.
So it was not the model of leadership that you would read in any book.
Yeah.
Because I was so triggered, and I was figuring out how to generate all this business and sell all these homes, and but it evolved over time, and I had some really tough endings of relationships and tough conversations, and that really put me in my place, and my faith was coming along. So with this whole, model of just, not that I'm even in the same, ballpark as Jesus, but just leading more like, that just a humble heart. And I'm not as humble as I could be. Julie reminds me of it all the time. She's like, yeah, he's working on his humility.
I think my wife would say the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm working on it though. That's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it just, it was a natural evolution in conjunction with kind of, faith, and also a desire to help other people, because you noticed and you looked around. So it's interesting. So at the beginning you said, yeah, like I didn't want to bring this to like my family. Like what you experienced as a young person. But then what happens is like, so once you did that for your family, now you start to look out and be like, well, I don't want like my neighbors to be dealing with this stuff. And that's like, the real estate community. So it's like, all right, let's expand our level of awareness to them. And for the last, I don't know, decade, you've been teaching agents how to scale and systematize their real estate business so they can reclaim margin and have time. And Jason, when somebody actually texts off a yard sign, you're telling me that you have a number of automations that comes back to them in terms of like videos and things of that nature?
Yeah, we're using a system called Call Action. And so basically when somebody will reach out to me off of the yard signs, we have like a text campaign that's going to automatically go out. We're going to send them information and pictures on the property. Also, if we have video marketing or any 3D tours, we're going to include that in the text campaign as well.
That's awesome. So not only do they get an automatic, I'm imagining text response with information about the property, whether it be like an info sheet, pictures, if you have a video, that'll automatically go out as well. And what are you finding, I guess, prior to automating that, what was the process like for you?
Well, before I had the whole call action set up, it's like most agents, you just have like your cell phone number on the yard sign. The only problem that we were running into with that is, somebody calls you off the yard sign, you don't really know where they're calling you from when you see the call come in. And so a lot of the times you would, end up missing the phone call and maybe not calling them back because, you get so many calls, you're not sure where this call came from. And there's times where, the agents won't call the missed calls back. And so, what we would do is have to, screen all the calls. We would have to make sure to reach out to everyone that we missed. And then we would have to manually, send them all the information that they requested. And so now, we have a sign writer that says, text for info, or, we could replace it with, text for 3D tour. And now it's all automatic. So, no running back to the computer to try to remember like who it was you spoke to. I used to run into the problem, like someone would call me when I was driving or something. I'd have a conversation with them, and it's hard to like capture their information when you're like driving or out in the field. And so it was always difficult to kind of like remember all the details. And so now another thing with Call Action is all the calls, the inbound calls are recorded and transcribed. So it just eliminates so much work that we were doing manually.
It sounds like you have also figured out a way, because you mentioned previously that you're using a third-party application, Call Action, to help automate the phone call. So not only do you have writers that say like, hey, text this information, and this automatic sequence comes in. If people call in, can you talk to a little bit about how you've utilized technology to automate that portion of the business?
So with a company like Call Action and with a technology like this, you can track where every single call is coming from. So it also helps when the phone call comes in, because, sometimes we get a phone call and we're maybe in the middle of something and we're like, oh, I'm gonna have to call this person back. But if you have a lead source that is a very strong lead source, man, when that lead source calls, you're going to go out of your way to answer. So like for me, it's like Yelp and Google calls. Those are usually like, come list me's. They're very ready to go. And so when I get a call from one of those lead sources, like whatever I'm doing, I'm going to make an extra effort to answer it. I could go back to the office. I can, listen to that conversation again. I could read the transcription. And another cool thing about it is when the call comes in is the system is going to try to pull as much public info as it can off of that phone number. So there's times that I get the person's name, I get maybe even their home address, I get, family members. There's a lot of information that's attached to the people's phone numbers.
Before you kind of go, because we're talking about a lot at one time, I want to make sure people can conceptually understand like how this is working. So it's texting automations on yard signs. Mm-hmm. So that way, you're giving them all the information, it'll increase the probability that they'll interact with you in some capacity. The second is automating on those phone calls. So when they come in, not only can you see the source of where they're calling from, but they're also transcribing that conversation, which makes your job easier. So I don't have to figure out, kind of who I talked to and what they were kind of asking about and what property they called about. And then the third form of automation is in both of those interactions with consumers. The system that you set up allows you to capture data and then put that into your CRM, something like Follow Up Boss. Is that right?
Exactly.
And why is that important, Jason? I think I'm pretty clear on why it's important, but can you share to the audience why that whole sequence is becoming increasingly more important?
Well, the main reason why it's so important to automatically add all inbound calls and all that information to our CRM is because most agents aren't going to get around to doing it. Okay, so they're having conversations on their regular cell phone with their regular cell phone number, which most businesses don't work off of your personal cell, which is it's huge to have like a business line. And so what was happening in the past is you have all these people that call and you never get around to adding them to your database. You got a desk full of little notes that you've written, Post-it notes everywhere. And so being able to automate that process not only helps you save time, but it helps you be more efficient.
I would propose to suggest, Jason, that moving in the future, agents who don't have a system like this set up will not be able to compete because they're not going to be able to provide the service, the speed, the efficiency that consumers are actually that's what their expectation is. Would you agree with that?
Well, look at Amazon, right? Like if I push the button and my package don't show up in 24 hours, I'm furious, right? And like you said, these companies making these consumer expectations, gone are the days, in my opinion, especially now with like ChatGPT, where you don't have the skills in place to act fast, get back to them on a timely basis. Most of the things that we use these days are instant gratification. The number one complaint I usually hear in this industry is, my agent never got back to me. He listed my house. I never heard from him again. They don't have systems in place to provide that type of service. The client's going to get a certain type of service, like even if I forget about them.
I think that's important for agents to begin thinking about because, Naval Ravikant says, if you want to get paid in the future, you need to live in the future. So if in the future,
Nice.
People's expectations are that instant kind of interaction, you give me all the information very quickly, and the system that you've set up in terms of automation allows you to be able to deliver that, then if I want to continue to get my unfair share in the future, I have to do that now. I think every business is accruing debt. And it's either financial debt, management debt, or technical debt. And with what we're talking about, this is like a technical debt thing, meaning like if I don't take the time to figure this stuff out or partner with somebody or learn from somebody like you or, whatever, then what's happened is I'm going to accrue, if I don't learn that skill set, I accrue technical debt in my business, which debt ultimately has to be paid at some point. You have to go back and like figure it out. So what would you say to those agents that are like, oh, because me and you hear that shit all the time. They're like, oh, I'm not really techie. It's not like my thing. Like,
Well, I actually say this a lot, and I got it from you. It's you had that analogy that you guys did at your retreat where you have them swim laps and then they put on like fatigues and then they swim laps again. And the point of it was you need to eliminate the drag. So figure out where the drag is, where what's keeping you from, putting these automations in place, and you need to eliminate the drag. So whatever you don't know how to do, you need to hire someone that knows how to do it, or you need to make it a point to learn it. I mean, half of the stuff that I've learned when it comes to like my computer techie stuff, I always make the joke is, I learned it from YouTube University. You could learn anything on YouTube. So you could learn how to do all of this stuff step by step. I was just telling you, I built a server and all this stuff. I didn't know how to do none of that. I didn't go to school for that. I learned it on YouTube.
If you spend 50 hours studying something, you will know more than like 95% of the population on that particular topic. So,
right.
It's like an hour a day.
Would it break down to 18 minutes a day?
Something silly, right? So, Yeah, you can either study it or you can get it done for you. And the done for you version is where you kind of pay somebody. And I'm also imagining too, with each one of these, it's like one of these might be a rock, meaning like, okay, I'm going to set up automations with the texts and maybe I'm going to take the next 90 days to figure this shit out. So I'm either going to watch YouTube videos. I'm going to reach out to Jason. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get that really plugged in. And then once you do that, then it's like, okay, let's do automations with the calls. All right, cool. How do I need to learn how to do that? And maybe that's your kind of next quarter rock. Like, did you put all this together like that, or was it like over time?
I spent like 2-3 weeks, like just focusing on my Yelp profile and focusing on how to make it better and, making it 100% complete. That's the way I typically am, is when I get something new, it's like, I'm like totally absorbed by it for that month or whatever, or for those few weeks. So it's going to take a while.
Yeah. And I hear from a lot of agents, they're like, well, like I don't really have time to mess with that because they're so focused on, kind of transactions and stuff, which I totally understand. At the same time, I would propose that they can't afford not to, because again, if you want to get paid in the future, you need to live in the future. And this is the setup that is going to be required. So if we are competing with super well funded, like super deep pocket tech companies, the way for us to continue to be able to compete is for us to have similar type system set up for ourselves, right? So versus like, okay, let's say prior to you having the system set up, somebody would call in, you'd be in the car, okay, and then you have to remember who they were and all this other stuff, and so much leakage, so much stuff slips through the cracks. Whereas now, what I want to go back to is you were saying like when these calls come in, they also automatically are put into follow-up plus your CRM. So there's like, anybody who's reaching out to you is being put into the CRM so that way they can be followed up with. Is that right?
Yeah, every single phone call that I receive automatically goes straight into the CRM, and it goes into like my new leads smart list. and I mean, everybody, I even have like, marketing people, spam. That's unfortunate. They do have some spam blockers they just installed, but every phone call goes straight into my CRM with the name that's attached to their phone number, with their phone number. When I get back to the computer, I just got to go into like my lead bucket, and you can see everyone that has called you recently, and then you go into there. You can also see just at a glance what the conversation was about.
That's dope. I love that. So, but that makes now you're behaving like these big tech companies. Now you have a system to where you're capturing all this data, and then you can go and do lead follow-up or prospect or do what needs to be done. But without this system, it's so wildly inefficient. One of the other things you've done, you've also automated gifting. So talk a little bit about that.
I use a company called EvaBot. I've been using them for years. It's really cool. It's basically, as soon as it's done, I set that action plan and an email goes out to the client asking them to, hey, my name is Eva. I'm Jason's, gifting assistant. Please click this link so that, I can ask you some questions and get your order. One cool thing that I really, really like is like if it's a seller, it automatically gets their forwarding address. The bot is going to ask them a series of questions so that it can customize a gift for them. It wants to know, like, do they like coffee or do they like tea? Do they have any allergies? Do they like alcohol? Do they have a pet? So it's going to ask them all this information, which is another cool thing about it because it's like an intake form. I can export all this information to my CRM, and these are questions that I'm not always asking the client, right? And so it takes all this information that it asks them, and it's going to put together a custom gift. It's going to be in a branded box. And so when the box shows up at their house, on the outside of the box, like Amazon has a big Amazon logo. Well, when my box shows up, it has, our branding, our logo on it. They open up the box and there's a handwritten card, so they also do like the fake computer generated handwritten cards. And, it's filled with, I don't know what that stuff's called, that stuffing stuff. And it has custom gifts, depending on how much that I've specified. I have a set amount.
It's able to send the customizable gifts based on the survey. And I'm imagining that you're not involved at all in the selection process of what gifts. It's EvaBot that's doing it.
All I did was set them a sold action plan, buyer sold. I assigned that action plan, and I just basically can forget about them for about a year.
It asks for referrals and reviews. How does it do that? Just with like text prompts, or what does it do?
It will send it'll send a series of emails. So it's going to send an email like, hey, we hope you had a really, I think it sends it when they get their gift. And it's like, hey, we hope you really liked your gift. Please make sure to, that spiel, reviews are very important to us.
I started reading this interesting book about leadership and duplication. But it talked about leadership being really just like different levels of consciousness. And the first level of like leadership or consciousness is like to me. And it's like victim mentality, which is like my happiness and my success is external to me. But then there's by me, which is like if it's to be, it's up to me. Yeah. You take like extreme ownership and accountability. And the bridge from to me to by me is responsibility. 95% of this population spends 98% of their time in to me. And he's like, all you have to do is look at the news. Something's bad happening. It's outside of you. They're the reason why. They're wrong and you're right. But then the next evolution is through me. And that's where, like, as a leader or as a human, you start to have this awareness, like there's something else that wants to accomplish something through me.
That's where you are now. That's where you're getting to.
That's where I'm getting to. And I think it's in conjunction, I can feel that.
Yeah, because you mastered the
by me.
The by me.
Well, and the interesting thing is, do you know what gets you from by me to through me? Surrender and letting go. But the reason why it's so hard is once you master the by me, you're in control. It's really hard to let go of control. So conversations with you, also I think reading the Bible for a year, starting the Bible study, where now this through me thing, now when you say to me it's only money, I get it. Yeah. But you said it to me a year ago, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, Lars? Like literally, I'm like, what are you saying? I don't understand.
But it really is. But it's also because we have the ability to go out and make it.
Yes.
Like
at will.
People have different problems,
But I also have this feeling where like, and it's interesting to articulate, I haven't told it to like too many people. When you were telling me like, hey man, like you're being called to like have an impact on more people, that was like a nudge in the through me in conjunction with like reading the Bible, in conjunction with the Bible study, where like what it really feels like is like that presence or being saying, hey, I want you to do this. And when you do it, you're in alignment with like his will, and as such, this gets easier. The kingdom of heaven is within you. When I say that, people think a geographic place, but kingdom in Greek, that's not what it means, that word. What it means is royal power, royal dominion, and royal control. That's a totally different message. One is like this space is within you. The other is the power, royal control, and royal dominion is inside of you to make it here as it is there. That's a call to action. Yeah. It's a call to lead.
Can you imagine going back and selling houses?
Never. Like literally, I'm driving around on my way home. I'm like, why would I ever, God? Or like, even if because I'm never on the road at like 6 o'clock. I used to not get home till like 8 o'clock. I'm like, I can't even imagine like, and I used to be excited, but like driving home at 7 o'clock having missed dinner, I'm like, I would never do that. Yeah. Ever.
And you told me that Carla once said to you, like you were almost telling her that you were a little bit like almost apologetic for how hard you worked, and she was like, honey, you created this amazing. Yeah. So, it's not all bad.
It's not all bad. No. It's not. And I think that it's interesting because the rub is I think in a way you have to go through that season.
100%.
You have to. And what I try to tell people, it's like the Rocky cutscene. Yeah. Like, the movie Rocky where he's like punching the meat and running up the hill. Everybody I know that's achieved really outsized outcomes have gone through that. Yeah. At least, and it could be 5 years, could be 7 years, could be 10 years. It depends on how long it is. Yeah. But me and Carla did this like couples retreat, and they have this, they call them ceremonies. But one of the ceremonies is you take a rose petal, the rose, and you pull off a petal and you look right at the person, square your body, and you're like, I appreciate, fill in the blank. Few things you become aware of. One, you don't do that often. But also, two, there's a lot of fucking rose petals. So you gotta like really...
Oh, like you're doing...
Each one.
Oh, that's awesome.
I go, she goes, I go, she goes. So you really gotta like dig and think about it. And like good stuff comes up. But the second one was, I'm sorry. And she looked at me and she was like, I'm sorry you had to miss out on some of the stuff with the kids. I fucking, like, bro, I went from being like totally fine to like, I couldn't even contain myself. It like pierced right into my chest.
But the fact that she said it to you.
Yeah. Like knowing that, like, I know you did that for us, but I'm sorry you had to do it.
And not harboring any resentment.
No.
Or even along the way. I mean, there were probably times she was
There was friction.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that threw me thing, now I have words to describe what I'm feeling. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
That concept of like, and what I think this is, the majority of it is getting people that are into me to buy me. Because I think that other journey is different, and I'm not saying it because...
It took me forever to realize that most people just are never going to step into the game.
I was telling Carla, like, the through me, first you have to believe in something that's bigger than you, or have faith in something that's bigger than you. That could be the quantum field, that could be God, that could be love. It has to be something.
I'm gonna go look at the spa menu right there.
The what menu?
Spa.
Okay, you have your phone? That happens first, but then too, you have to also, I feel like, go through the whole buy me thing. I told Jose, I was having this whole long conversation with him, like, bro, the reason why it's so hard for you to get out of production is because you're finally in control. It took you 10 years.
At the highest level.
At the highest level, and now you can do it at will. So it's very difficult to let it go.
I still think you'll build a big coaching company too.
You do?
I think so. I think you won't help but be able to do it.
Yeah, it'll happen.
On your terms, just stick to your 10 or 12 clients.
Yeah.
You know, and you'll have people that come through that crush it, that can coach 10 or 12 people.
Yeah, Jessica, who's here, she's one of the coaches for us right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't coach anymore, but I'm ramping up my coaching company again.
You are?
And I love it.
Yeah?
Yeah. I'm now finally out of sales. I got a sales guy to replace me.
Yeah?
I went back into sales. Did I ever tell you that?
No.
Dude, I worked hard from October.
Like you being the sales guy for coaching calls?
Yeah. From like October to like the end of like for 4 months straight.
You were doing it all?
Doing it all. I
Why
did
though?
150, 160 because I redid the whole coaching company, the whole offer.
But why did you feel like the need to be in the sales thing?
Because the guy had was a lot of reasons. I'm coached by same guy that coaches like Grant Cardone's sales team.
Okay.
Like the coach I have now is probably it's Cole Gordon.
Okay.
So it's his one of his guys who is a closer for him. That's now a coach for him. And he said we had to recraft the whole offer. I rewrote all the marketing, filmed the VSL, restructured everything, and I had to figure out if I could sell it or not.
Okay, so you had to
and I had to hear people say, was the marketing hitting and the sales call and
what the objections are going to be and like all that.
Yeah, all of it. I mean, it's not completely dialed in, but I'm out of it now.
That's awesome.
So, because I got to do something for the next 5 years.
But what are you going to do after 5 years?
Well, that's when Kendall will be in college.
And then what? You'll just disappear?
Nah, I'll probably be doing another 5 years.
Right?
I'm only committing 5 years at a time. No, I'll be doing stuff actively in business until I'm 60 probably.
Yeah?
But when I'm 55, I really want to be like not way less checked in.
And more checked in. What are you going to divert your energy to?
I think Open Eyes. You know the organization I went to Nepal and
just spend more
Africa with them this year.
Yeah, with your son, right?
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Should be awesome. So I could easily. I mean, he attracts some real talent. The guy that runs that I'm really close with.
Well, and you can also, I'm imagining. Did you ever read the book Halftime?
Oh yeah, I've read all that. Bob Berg.
Yeah, so like
he referred it to me.
Yeah, so like you could channel all of everything you've learned into like an organization like that.
I read I listened to Halftime when I was turning 44. I was on a long run down Hilton Head on my 44th birthday. I'm like, this is Halftime, and then I re-listened to it like 6 months ago. And I realized that I really didn't. I mean, I guess to a certain extent, I've restructured. Whatever you bring. But I haven't really done as much as like, I'm definitely like square in the third quarter now. So now it's
rounding third?
Yeah, I mean, the third quarter is like essentially it takes you through like, early 60s or whatever. But I definitely want to do something I like stuff like this. I mean, I like business. I like helping agents. And I think there's like a lot of struggle in the world at large.
Oh yeah.
That's just
I was telling Jess, like, because with her agents, there's, stuff comes up. And I'm like, dude, I need you to understand something. She's like, what? I'm like, you're dealing with a broken pool. 65% of people live paycheck to paycheck. That's 7 out of 10, bro. You're standing at Starbucks, 7 of them
can't afford that cup of coffee.
I heard the other day that the average realtor in North America has $4,000 in savings.
That wouldn't surprise me at all.
That would surprise me. It's that much.
Yeah, but I don't know about you, but like I get people on calls like crying, like telling me all their stuff. It's like all the background stuff that's going on in their life.
Yeah, it's a jacked up industry. That is motivation. I talked to they were 30 years in real estate, a husband and wife, and they didn't have I'm like, it's an $8,000 90-day program that I'm selling now.
They didn't have the $8,000?
They didn't have $2,000.
Wow.
I had to make them take out a credit card.
You did?
Yeah. I'm like, I don't have anything. I have nothing. And then they had a small team, so they needed stuff that we could
change. Nothing's going to change.
No. And they're doing really well.
That for them, you want to be like, oh, should I ask them to do this? But it's like, that's what they need. That's putting their back up against the wall. Like, that could be the change for them.
And you're when you do something like that, for me, like I'm not a hardcore closer.
I know. I find that so interesting that you would do that.
Like, you got to do it. I've gotten people. I mean, I get into their finances.
You got that guy. I forgot his name that we were both talking to. He signed up. He didn't have the money either.
Yeah, he had to go 2002.
Yeah.
He didn't have.
He didn't have
$1,000.
That's unbelievable, though.
But that's like everybody.
I know, dude.
I mean, like maybe 3/4 of people don't have
right.
At least a toothpaste. They don't have $4,000.
No.
When I joined Craig Proctor, I couldn't afford anything. I made them right on the what was like white, green, yellow, pink, the 4 different. I made them right on it. Will not charge credit card for 90 days.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I got everything. I had nothing. Like my mom had to charge me $500 to get to the event.
You told that story at his.
You did.
Yeah.
Did you guys see the content from that? It was so good.
Yeah, your content editor is great.
That
was so good.
That little short of me talking about you calling me. Did you see that?
Yeah. So good.
Good, yeah. That was good.
So good.
I was like, my palms were sweating. Like we were united.
What are you doing?
6 days later.
Yeah, it was so fast.
And on the Tuesday after the Saturday, I had to tell Thomas I was leaving.
I was just telling somebody about that story this past week, and they were like, what? Like that fast? And I'm like, yup.
Yeah, because fear trumps facts. Well, it's interesting because you would think, because we do these events all the time, and I'm always like, either I'm doing the event or I'm the closer. I'm the EXP guy at the end doing the talk. And you would think when I show people the numbers and I explain it the way I do, they all leap out of their fucking chairs and they're like, let's go. That's not what happens. Yeah. You know what I've noticed? I think a couple things happen. One is I think the numbers, they don't compute. They don't seem real. I'll show them those numbers and they'll be like, yeah, but isn't there like a $25 broker review fee? I'm like, bro, did you just see what I just showed you, bro? Like, why the fuck are you even thinking about that, right? So that's number one.
Tell me more about the startup fee.
Yeah, but the second thing I noticed is that people don't see themselves in me. And they'll tell themselves a story. They'll be like, oh, well, John is like, oh, Lars is like. And it's like, yeah, but then let's say.
That's why you got to get to these events.
Well, I had a conversation with that Freedom Builders Mastermind I run, which are high-level dudes, like 750 or more GCI. And I was like, hey, what if somebody came to your market and said there's no deals in the Carolinas? None, no listings. What would you tell them? Like, yeah, it's not fucking true. I'm like, okay, what would you tell them they need to do? They need to learn the skills how to do it. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, don't you guys say that shit to me all the time? She's like, oh, bro, the media and this. I'm like, you just got to learn how to do it, dude. It's not.
I came into this, too, being on the road for a year and a half. I was unplugged. I haven't talked to anybody. So all the relationships that I had, only the really, really good ones were there still because I hadn't talked to anybody in like almost 2 years.
Really?
And now I'm calling people up. Hey, what's going on? You know, so it was like a long delay in that process to be able to talk to them.
Yeah.
They're like, why is John calling me? I haven't heard from him in years.
Wow.
Jason Chimboff. Hadn't spoken to the guy in at least 2 years. Halfway through watching the 30-minute Brent Cove model.
He's like, I'm ready.
He goes, John, can I interrupt you? Hold on a second. And I'm like, yeah, what's going on, Jason? He goes, "Are you doing EXP?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, I'm in." Didn't even let the video play.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay."
But yeah, that's funny you had that.
But,
I want to do like videos on, because I don't think people, I don't, not that I think, I know they don't read ICAs at all. And I wanted,
ICAs, yeah.
they don't read them at all. I'll be like, yo, what's your ICA say? They're like, what? I'm like, you know that thing you signed? They're like, what are you talking about? They don't even look at them. But I want to do like this thing that's baffling to me. And I don't know if people would, you know, if it would cause like a ruckus, but like how Compasses or Caldwell's, their model is legitimately taking advantage of contractual law. Like that's what it is. It's basically trapping agents, because we all agree.
talking about Compass?
Yeah,
They're the worst.
or Compass or Caldwell, they do the same thing.
Yeah.
Where like, essentially like
The agents don't even know that when they take the marketing fee that they're re-upping the entire contract again.
for 3 years.
Yeah. It's awful.
Dude, it's awful.
I have a guest that's supposed to be here, and he had another conversation with his attorney and got so disheartened. He's just kind of like,
I got 2 guys who just came recently. One paid $77,000 to get out.
yeah.
Another one $55,000.
And he's complaining about the 70 or 100,000 he's going to pay. I'm like, dude, you're paying it anyway.
So Kristen, as a real estate attorney, how do you feel about agents' compensation and these proposed rule changes that are coming up in July? I hear a lot, agents make too much money and this and that. Like, how do you feel as an attorney?
So I definitely think that there's a need for change. I do think the way that agents are compensated is probably problematic when you look at the antitrust laws and the lack of competition, whether we're going to agree or not that fees are fixed or they're standard compensation or standard percentages or not. As far as how much agents get paid, I think that really should be determined by the free market and what the parties are willing to accept and the consumers willing to pay. So I don't really have an opinion or a feeling either way on that, but I do think it benefits everybody to have a more competitive market. And I do think that was lacking in the way that traditionally compensation and commissions are done in real estate transactions.
I understand. So in other words, the mechanism, you don't have a particular issue with the amount of compensation, just like, you know, because as somebody who sold a lot of real estate, I always found it interesting, and I'm not suggesting you do this, but attorneys would reach out to us to talk about fees, and I'd be like, hey, bro, I didn't say anything about your fees. Like, why are you talking to me about mine, right? So you have no issue with how much they get compensated. It's more so allowing the market to do what it does, which is, in the absence of value, the only thing to compete on is price. And if you are providing more value, then great, you can get compensated whatever the marketplace is willing to pay you. Is that right?
Exactly. And that's really what I think is lacking here. So you could have 2 agents that provide vastly different amounts of value in a particular transaction, but how we have traditionally paid agents, their compensation would either be the same or very similar. And so that's where I think the issue lies. I think the market dictates how much agents get paid. I think the value and the service they provide. And I also think the consumer and how much they value professional service and convenience and things of that nature is going to all determine how much they get paid. And so I think you're exactly right in how you summed it up.
Yeah. And it's, you know, whenever I say this to the Asian population, there's a lot of like defending. And we talked about that. And like, it's not really about like defending. It's more about educating. At the same time, like if you really stop and reflect, what other profession could somebody who's brand new and just got a license, right, who needed to get a 75 on a test, have $1,000 and not be a felon, make the same amount of money as me, who has sold 2,000 properties in their career, and, you know, has been to the closing table that many times? And the answer is like none. So as an attorney, when you got out, I'm imagining you didn't make as much money as an attorney who's been doing it for like 20 years, correct?
Correct. And I mean, in my practice, we bill hourly, and the state has regulations on fees being reasonable. And so as a first-year attorney, what I could reasonably charge hourly is very different than what I can charge now as a 14-year attorney. And that's, you know, how I think it should be. And with the real estate industry, you know, a lot of what I'm seeing is commission-based industries do sometimes have it set up where, regardless of your experience, the commission's the same, but that's typically when you're selling a product, not providing a service or a professional service. And so I do agree with what you just said, and it should absolutely be based on many different factors that make up the agent and the transaction and in the agreement, obviously, between consumer and agent.
Yeah. So being that that's the case, I guess, from your perspective, as somebody who is a professional in a professional industry that does have regulations, having gone through that track yourself personally, for someone like me who has that track record already, who has over 500 5-star reviews, who can demonstrate value, not just nonsensically with marketing words, but actually practically and tangibly, right? What would you suggest for, agents that perhaps don't have that? Because they're going to have to start not only having conversations, which I've been having forever from the listing perspective, which is, hey, here's the products and services that I provide you with. Here's the compensation that you're going to pay me to do that. And here's what we're going to do for you. Are you clear on that? Yes, I need you to sign this agreement. They're going to have to start doing that on the buy side. And what I'm aware of is that most agents industry wide are very buy side heavy. Like 60 to 80% of their deals are buy side deals. They've never had to do a formal presentation and they've never had to demonstrate value or ask for money. So what would you suggest to those agents? I know that there's one component, which, is the legal component in terms of documentation and how to document that. The second is from a business perspective, because you have to sit down with people all the time and say, hey, here's how I add value. Here's the compensation. Are we clear? Yes. Sign this agreement.
Sure. And so, when I started my law firm, I was a 5-year attorney. And so I didn't have the experience. I couldn't say I've been doing this for 20 years. I know exactly how it's going to go. But how I did it and how I think that newer agents or maybe less experienced agents could approach it is, I'm young. I'm hungry. I am going to hustle. You are my most important client. You are my biggest deal. That guy that's been doing it over there for 20 years, you're probably one of his smallest deals and you're going to take priority that way. I'm part of a team. I'm part of a brokerage. I can find the answers for you, but I'm going to hustle for you and really treat this like this is my top priority. And that's what I did. And a lot of times what I've learned is, obviously the expertise and the ability to provide the service is very important. And agents have resources, they can partner with attorneys. They have maybe a team or a broker that can provide those for them. But people really just want to know, you're going to do what you say you're going to do, and you're going to do it when you tell me you're going to do it. So a lot of times if I have a question or if a client has a question, they just want a response from me, even if the response is, I got your question. I'm going to do some research and I will get back to you tomorrow on this. That's perfectly fine versus you being able to spit out a substantive answer on the fly. So that's how I approached it. And that's how I really think that some of these maybe less experienced agents can approach it because all buyers, all consumers, they're going to value different things. They're going to have different budgets. So maybe somebody wants the 20-year agent with all of the experience, but that's not within their budget. And so there's a place for everybody. Everybody can make it if they're willing to, put in the work, pivot, make the changes, and be creative in a sense to sell themselves to these consumers.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. When I'm reflecting back initially, when I was initially going on appointments and didn't have that track record, I did the exact same thing. And it's interesting because then in the marketplace, that's what people, if I'm in a competitive situation, that's what they try to feed the seller to get them to choose them versus me. Oh man, Aaron's really busy, bro. You're just going to get his assistant. So what's fantastic about this is the competitive, of course we're going to do it with integrity and straightforward and we're not going to bash anybody, but this is competitive aspect of business, right? And to your point, there's a place for everyone. We were talking before we got started that, an analogy I've been giving agents regularly is when you go on a plane, you have choices. You can sit in the back in Spirit and you know what that experience is going to be. It's not going to be great and it's cheap though. Or you can get some leg room and you pay some more money for that. And I'll see, maybe with some leg room, you pay some more money for that, or you can sit up front. And what I've been asking agents is hey, how many times have you been on a plane and first class is empty? Never. It's well, wait a minute. They have cheaper options at their disposal, but it's yeah, there's a certain segment of the population that will pay for convenience, will pay for comfort, will pay for speed, right? First on the plane, first off, that sort of thing. And that's okay. That's capitalism. And nobody freaks out about that. It's perfectly all right. So I think to your point, one of the things that agents have to decide, because there will be an explosion, which I'm curious to see from your perspective in terms of creativity and what you're hearing from brokers asking you to draft up agreements and things of that nature. in terms of different compensation for different forms of representation, you have to decide where you're going to be in that value chain. So are you going to be Nordstrom's, where it's like, yo, we don't do Walmart, okay? Like if you want Walmart, that's not us. I can point you to Walmart, it's cool, right? Or are you going to be a Walmart and say like, yeah, we will do let's say for representation, a flat fee of whatever that is, whatever that number is, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, independent of purchase and sales price. And we will do 5 or 6 of those a month, and that's how we'll make money.
Sure. And there's a market for both of those, right? So as an agent, you just have to be comfortable that if you are going to say, I'm going to be the Nordstrom, I'm going to charge higher, I'm going to provide a better service, you have to be okay with a consumer looking for a Walmart saying no to you. Like you have to be okay losing that buyer or that listing or whatever. And same with if you're going to be the Walmart, I'm going to do it more on a volume base. I'm going to provide, more cost-effective services. You have to be okay with people wanting more experience or better service, saying no and walking. There's consumers for both of those options and everywhere in between. So I think that's definitely part of it. You have to decide your value. You have to decide what you're going to provide and stick with that. Don't try to pivot to be what every single buyer or consumer wants, because you're never going to be able to be that for everybody.
Yeah, and I think, I've had a coaching business for a decade, teaching agents how to sell real estate in high volume. And I tell them regularly, like, if you don't have a competitive advantage, don't compete. And, people try to be like, well, my competitive advantage is I put the clients first. I'm like, guys, everybody says that. That is not a competitive advantage. Or they're like, I'm honest. I'm like, no, that is not a competitive advantage. So as an agent, I have to think about, okay, where do I fit in that ecosystem? And there's no shame or blame or whatever about where you are. Whatever you want to be, do that and do you. The second is actually coming up with a very clear and concise value proposition of what you're going to be offering. So here is my value. So like you were saying, if you're new, like, yo, here's my value. You're going to be one of a handful of clients that I'm going to dedicate all of my time and energy to, right? It's concierge. Like I'll be at your disposal all the time. And like, I'm going to go to the inspections. I'm going to go to the appraisal. I'm going to get in the attic, like whatever you're going to do, like whatever your value proposition is. And then once you come up with that formal value proposition, and here's where I would like to get some insight from you. Now you're going to have a conversation about, okay, cool. So we're clear on the services that I'm going to be providing you with. Now I'd like to talk to you about compensation and how I get compensated, because there's some various different ways how that could happen. Would that be okay? And they're like, yeah, that's great. Well, the first option is that the seller and the listing agent will provide compensation for me. Great. The second option is they can offer us a concession, right? Because we're still allowed to do that per the new rules in the multiple listing service. And you can use that concession towards the compensation for me, or you could use it towards your closing costs, which would free up capital to have compensation. The third option is if in the outside chance they don't offer out anything, then you would be responsible for that compensation. Are you clear on how I get compensated? Yes. Do you still wish to proceed? Yes. I need you to sign this buyer broker's agreement. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is another way that, maybe some agents aren't happy about this change and happy about having to have this conversation up front with buyers, but it's going to protect both the consumer and the agent. I mean, how many agents end up working for months without any sort of compensation? The amount of procuring cause claims that we see, those are likely going to go down because, agents should have been using buyer broker agreements all along anyway. I realize, at least in my area, the vast majority have not been, but I do think this is a positive change on both sides. And that's exactly how the conversation should work. It shouldn't be, here's the value I provide, here's my compensation, seller may pay it or not, and let me just slide this document over to you and you sign it, because we all know that consumers aren't reading the contracts that they're signing. So the way you kind of broke that down is exactly how that conversation should go. And aside from the settlement agreement, if it gets approved, stating that the compensation has to be specific or it has to have a specific formula to get to the compensation, there's a lot of opportunity to customize the service is provided, how you're going to be paid, when you're going to be paid. You can be paid on an hourly basis and agree that you only owe it if we close. I mean, the sky's the limit as far as how agents can structure their pay, with the exception of course, you can't say whatever seller's going to pay is my compensation. It has to be specific, but within those bounds, there's a lot of room for customization there.
Yeah, and I think for people who are smart, hardworking, and ambitious and entrepreneurial, I think it's like a pretty wonderful opportunity. And what's interesting about this is, these are conversations that because 80% of all of the transactions I did were on the listing side. So these were conversations that I would have all the time. Here's what my service is. Here's how I'm going to be compensated. They would want to negotiate a fee, want to negotiate what happens if I bring a buyer on the other side, right? If I represent both sides. And we would come to a meeting of the minds up front. And what I've been telling people is that the only reason, to your point, why buyers agents have not been getting buyer brokers agreements signed is because it wasn't mandatory. And so I asked them a question. I'm like, well, how many of you guys would ever input a listing in the multiple listing service without a listing agreement? And they're like, well, that would be ridiculous. I'm like, why? Because it's mandatory. You have to have a listing agreement to input in multiple listing. I'm like, so this is the same thing. It's really not that huge of a difference. I think it's different, and anything we perceive to be, I think as humans, we're very much so wired for certainty, and anything that's new is perceived to be like dangerous. So people freak out about it. At the same time, like